In this video, I'll show you how you can change the default screen transition animations when using Compose navigation and how you can apply your own custom ones. By the end of the video, you'll understand all the different aspects about screen transitions and how you can apply them in a reusable way across your entire application. Let's do this. First things first, let me show you what we've got so far. So here I have a little application that has two screens in different color, and then there is this button that navigates between them. And as we can notice, the default transition between these screens, this animation is fading in and fading out, which is less than ideal. If you want to create more delightful UI or better user experience, we need to change this and make it a little bit better. Back in the code, I have defined a screen composable that takes in the label, the background color, and what happens when we click on the button, which is essentially a box that expands across the whole size, applies the background that comes in, and aligns its content in the center. Inside I have a column that aligns its children horizontally to the center, and vertically it is spacing them by 12 dps. And then inside I have just a text that represents the label that comes in, and a button that says click to navigate. And when we click, we are calling that on-click callback that is coming into this screen. Next, I have two destinations, first screen and second screen. Pretty straightforward, nothing special here. And finally, I have a NavHost that takes in nav controller and a start destination, which is the first screen. And inside I have these two composables, which represent the first screen and the second screen respectively. Now, how do we change the transitions between the screens? If you take a look into this NavHost implementation, inside it has this enter transition, exit transition, pop enter transition, and pop exit transition, which are basically lambdas. And we have to override those because the default ones, as we can see, is fade in and fade out. And that's what we are going to work on now. So to get started, first we are going to focus on the enter transition, which is a transition that defines how the screen that comes in is going to animate. And if we take a look here into the type, this lambda has to produce an enter transition. So whatever we put inside this lambda has to be of type of enter transition. Of course, we can create our custom transition, whatever we want, but there are also some built-in transitions that we are going to use here. So for this one, the screen that comes in, I want to slide from the left to the right. And so the transition that I'm gonna use here is gonna be slide into container. And as we can notice, this slide into container transition is of type enter transition. So that's what we are going to use. And now that I have this slide into container, I have to define towards where this transition is going to happen. So here I have to apply towards argument, which is a slide direction. And since I want my transition to be from the right to the left, here I can say slide direction left. Additionally, I can also change the animation specs, which by default are twin, and that's gonna allow me to tune my animation the way I want. So for now, I'm just gonna say again twin, and I'm gonna change the default duration millis, which is 300 milliseconds, to 1 second so that we can actually see what we are doing. It's gonna be easier for us to understand. Now let's run and see what happens. Now, when I attempt to navigate, the screen that comes in is transitioning from the right to the left, and it takes about 1 second to do that animation. Now, the screen that goes away is still fading out, and we have to change that next. So to change the animation of the screen that goes away, we have to apply here an exit transition, which by default is only fading out. As we can see here, the type that this lambda has to produce is exit transition. So again, I'm going to use something that's already built in, and this time I'm going to use scale out and exit transition. Once again, I am able to change the animation specification for this one, as well as what's going to be the target scale. As we can see here, the default target scale is 0, which means it's going to scale down everything to nothing, and we don't want that. I just want just a little bit of scale down to make it look nice. So here I'm gonna change the target scale to 90%. And again, I'm gonna utilize the animation spec to change the default duration of this animation so we can see it better. For this transition, I'm gonna make it half a second. Now let's run and see what happens. Now when I click, as you can see, the screen that goes away is scaling down to 90%, and then the screen that comes in is transitioning from the right to the left, and that's exactly what I want. However, when I navigate back, which happens when I click from the second screen towards the first, the things are not looking nice, and that is because we haven't changed these other transitions, which is something that we are going to do next. Next, we are going to define the pop enter transition, and as we can see here, this lambda has to produce enter transition as well. Now this transition is defining the animation that is running when the screen is coming back. So when we are going back from somewhere, the screen that comes in, how that screen is going to animate. In this case, because we navigated away with scale out, we want to navigate back in with scale in. And that's a transition that we are going to apply here. Now here, as we can see, the initial scale, meaning that from which scale we are going to scale to 100%, by default is 0. And we need to change that because we scaled down to 90%. Now when coming back, we are scaling back from 90% back to 100. And in that sense, I'm going to change the initial scale also to 90%. And once again, that is because we scaled down to 90% and now we want to get back from 90 to 100. So these two numbers need to be the same. So we're gonna have smoother experience. And again, I'm gonna utilize the animation spec here to change the duration so that we can see in the preview a bit better what's happening. I'll put here also half a second. Now let's run and see how that's gonna look like. So I navigate away, the screen goes down and this new one comes in. When I navigate back, you see that screen that was there is transitioning from 90% to 100%. And the only problem here is now this last thing that we have to fix, which is how this other screen is going away, the screen that was there before. So that one we also want to transition, but this time from the left to the right. And to do so, here we are going to apply pop exit transition. Once again, this lambda needs to produce an exit transition. And because we used sliding to container for that screen to come in, we want to use similar sliding to let it go away. And in that sense, here I'm going to use slide out of container. The only mandatory argument here is towards where this is going to slide. And in this case, I'm going to slide it from left towards right. So towards is going to be right. And once again, I'm going to change the default duration of this animation so you can see better what's happening. Now let's run and see how everything is going to work together. So when I click to navigate, the screen that goes away scales down to 90%. And the screen that comes in is transitioning from the right to the left, something that we already saw. But when I click to navigate back, this screen should go away. And then the screen that comes in is scaling up to 100%. So this is exactly the transition that I wanted. And I've done it only by using these 4 arguments here, or 4 lambdas. Of course, I can play a little bit with these animations and I can make them a bit better. And for fun, I can change the entering to spring with medium bouncy. And now when we look into it, this entering transition is making it jump a bit. But of course, now the duration is not the same, so it goes very fast. Hard to see. Now, additional things that we can do when using twin animations, we can change the default easing, which is fast out, slow in. Here we can apply something like linear out, slow in easing. Again, utilize this duration to see how everything's gonna work, so that when you bring it back to default, it's gonna look perfect. Now I'm gonna leave that on you to play a little bit, understand better how these animation specs are going to change those animations. And I'm going to remove them from this implementation to bring it back to the default, and then I'm gonna run the application to see how everything looks like with the default. So navigate there, navigate back, in, out. So this transition is already something that I like, and that's something I can reuse across my application. And of course, if I change the directions, for example, slide in to up and then down here, it's going to make also the transitions interesting, something that we've seen on Android before with the activities. Probably you are going to recall, and you can play with this and see what works for your application best. Now for the final part, how can I make this reusable and apply across my entire application? Now, of course, this assumes that maybe you're going to have multiple NavHosts, because if you have one, you do it once and everything's going to work right away. But if you need to have multiple NavHosts and you want to reuse, then what we can do is we can wrap this NavHost into our own custom function that will have these defaults instead of the defaults that are on a NavHost. To do so, I'm going to grab all these here. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to create here a new composable function that I'm going to call sliding NavHost. Inside, I'm going to paste the thing that I have just copied, and then I can do a little bit of rearrangements. Now, first, I'm going to extract this modifier and make it as an argument of the function. and I'm going to default it to a modifier so that the caller doesn't always have to pass this. Next, I'm going to take in nav controller, which is going to be a mandatory argument. And finally, I'm going to take in navgraph builder lambda with receiver. Now that I have this builder, I'm only going to pass it down to the NavHost. Now that I've passed the builder, I realize I'm taking in wrong argument type for nav controller, should be NavHost controller. And ultimately, we also have to pass the start destination instead of hard coding it this way, because this is not going to be scalable and it won't work, obviously. And so I'm just going to use the extract parameter refactoring, and I'm going to name this start destination as well. And then as a type, instead of first screen here, I'm going to use any. That should make it work. And ultimately, I'm going to change the signature of this function and move the start destination as a third argument as well. Now that would make it nicer. And of course, now if I want, I can define the enter transition, exit transition, and all the rest as defaults here, so that when we are using the sliding nav host, we are going to have similar situation that we have now with the nav host, but overridden the default transitions to be these ones. And then when we are using the sliding nav host, we're going to have that flexibility to override, let's say, one of these, or maybe change some other arguments that we need to. Obviously, that can be based on your needs, and you can do that on your own. But for now, I'm just going to take this sliding nav. I'm going to apply it here instead of the nav host that we used. And finally, I'm going to remove all these arguments that we are passing right now. And so I ended up using my custom sliding nav host that is basically a reusable composable function that I can reuse elsewhere if I need to have nav host. Let's run and make sure that everything remains working as expected. And let's try out. Well, everything works exactly as we are expecting. The last thing I want to mention here is that these transitions are also going to work in navigation tree, meaning that if you end up changing navigation to navigation tree later on, these transitions are also going to work if they don't end up changing the API that is currently there, because nav3 library is still in alpha and the API may change. If they don't end up changing that, this is also going to work. So your porting would be easy as well. Now that's gonna be it. I hope you found this useful. If you want more goodies like this, find a link in the description below this video. See you in the next one.